You know, everyone is moving to AI in some form or fashion. I mean, we're kind of kidding ourselves. We've done a lot of work here on the program discussing this. However, are there legal risk? Is there a way to create or build into your processes some safeguards, some boundaries that ensure lack of bias? That's a good question. And I haven't really seen many companies that are focused on this in particular until today. Isn't that right, Chris? Nice to
It's one of
have
my
you,
favorite
sir.
topics. Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony.
Well, we were kind of talking off air. We were like, okay, good God, how are we going to talk about, AI and ethics and responsibility in a, 30 to 45-minute podcast? We're like, well, we're going to see what we can do. We're going to give it a
Yeah,
try.
you tackle that along with all the fun stuff that's going on with AI. That's a massive conversation today.
Yeah, it is, and maybe one day we'll be, as popular as Joe Rogan, and people will tune in for 3 hours. But until then, we'll do our best to hold up our part of the conversation here for business leaders. So, first of all, how is it that you even came up with this idea? I mean, yes, it's a thing, but why you? Why are you kind of uniquely positioned to tackle something as broad and as far reaching as this?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for it alone, actually. Before I moved into the independent space and started a couple of startups, I worked for a pretty large data and research company called SIA, also known for some conferences and some networking that they do across enterprise buyers and providers in this space. I just had the position where I was sitting in front of people in training environments and webinars and conferences, and we had a legal partner named Eric Rumbaugh, who incredibly smart lawyer who focuses on employment law. And I used to hear him talk about this over and over and over again in front of all these audiences. And he says, "Yep, everybody's using AI. The one thing you got to do is just make sure you're validating your system to make sure you're doing it safely and in a compliant way." And he said, I just don't know of anybody that's out there doing it. So if anybody knows, let me know, because I feel like this is inevitable that we need this service. And we went for a couple of years and really didn't hear anything in the market. And then finally, it just happened that it was kind of this perfect storm of opportunity where we all came together and said, what if we create this? And so I put my head down for a few months and really started to figure out what validation even meant inside of an AI hiring system. And we've really evolved the model through the creation of some standards, training material, and a pretty robust set of offerings that helps companies really evaluate and think about all of those responsibility requirements inside of their AI systems. And as we're starting to use AI more and more in these processes, it brings kind of this new set of responsibility that people just haven't thought about. And so it's kind of time for a quick pause and say, let's go figure that piece out so we can just keep moving really fast on the AI side.
Yeah, just when you thought, great, okay, we're going to adopt AI, now we have the next iteration, and that is, are you, if I'm going to say this right, are you using it properly? Is that or is it built into your system in such a way that you're compliant? Now, as I did a little bit of research, I was trying to determine were there any governmental agencies that have officially come out with any standards. And this is your area of expertise, but based on the research I did inside of Grok, there's been no official blanket government standard put out there. There have been some agencies that have put some guidance out there. I saw something from EEOC that put something out called the AI Algorithmic Fairness Initiative. So I'm kind
Yeah,
of
some
curious,
some guidance around it. Yeah.
a little bit of guidance. So, how is it that you're creating a framework? Where are you gathering your information to build that into your framework?
Yeah, so we'll first say EEOC is the number one authority for all the laws as it relates to just employment and hiring and discrimination. And when you look at some of those laws and requirements, the one thing that has been really impactful is about 2023. There was a ruling that says that those laws still apply even when you're using an AI system, and you have to think about the application of those laws in that context of AI. And so there is some infrastructure around what compliance looks like. And so when it comes to following the law, you have to make sure that there's no bias, that you're creating a fair, non-discriminatory environment. And I think that's the risk that everybody tends to kind of gravitate to when they think about hiring. But when you bring in the AI side of things, you also have to think about things like security and data privacy. And this is where we start to kind of marry that AI space along with the hiring space, and you start to think about all that nuance and how it applies to that hiring space specifically. But then I think you start to go a little bit further. Right now, while the laws in the US are a little bit limited and there's been some guidance, you can start to look at things like the EU AI Act, which I think have really set a strong standard for what the right processes for transparency and explainability look like. And so we're starting to see all of these different components coming out across the globe, where it becomes important for all of these local entities to say, this is what we should be doing. So I think it's inevitable. We'll see more regulation. We'll see more restriction around this. And yeah, there's been some guidance. If you're a federal contractor, you probably see a lot more guidance coming from the government on what this looks like. And I think there's even been some strong signaling from some government memorandums that there's an expectation to be using AI, but not just using it, but using it fairly.
As I have been researching which AI system or tool I like to evaluate and bring into our company of branches for staffing across the country, we're really relying on, I think most companies rely on the partner that you're going to be using their tool. I don't know any companies that are fully trying to create their own internal. Maybe there are. I know there are. I think for a lot of us, it's a little easier rather than trying to create something, right? Is to bring a third party in. So, what's your best advice for someone who's evaluating a third party AI system to ensure that these safeguards are there?
Yeah, and so there's a lot there. I mean, when you start to think about third party
Hey, I can
systems,
just ask these
um,
softball questions
no,
and sit back and listen to you
this
go
is
on
an
this.
important step of that transformation, I think, around AI. And I think there's very much a life cycle that we're starting to follow, where it starts off with this exploration and kind of preparedness phase, where we're starting to think about how we can use it. We're starting to leverage tools even like ChatGPT in our own world, and then we start to go into some of these pilot programs where we're starting to say, hey, how can we start to apply AI in some really easy use cases where we can see some quick value, and let's go see if we like it, and kind of do this carefully for some of these initial pilots. And I think that's where our third party vendors come in and have some amazing position, where they've already got software in our environments and they're already motivated to start increasing their capabilities around AI, and starting to use more of these components. And so this becomes a really obvious first place to start in thinking about some of those third party risk management procedures. And I think from a procurement perspective, it's a whole set of questions. I talk to business users all the time, and they hate that assessment, that third party risk process that takes a month to evaluate technology.
I
And
know it's
they're
like,
asking all the deep questions about security. But
and
that's
and
really
the
critical.
entrepreneurs just want to grab it and go, and just start using it.
You want to adopt, you want to move quickly. That's one of the cool things about AI, is that life cycle is so short, and we've got this kind of compliance checkpoint that we've got to stop and kind of go through that gate. And I think right now it is a little bit of a cumbersome review, because there hasn't been that standardization of what good looks like across all these applications. But I can say it's a pretty robust set of evaluations. So you have to think not just about the bias and the discrimination components of these tools. I mentioned security, data privacy. You got to think about, when I say data, what information is it even using inside of the model? And is that appropriate for it to use? And so then we even
Right.
cross into that space of ethics, which is a whole other conversation above just the laws of what we have to do. It's what should we be doing with some of these systems?
Yeah. And many of these AI systems, they're being built with LLMs. So you're really looking into how has the LLM been programmed? What information is it using to create its store of knowledge and intelligence. Because if we're talking about hiring, what we're really talking about is a system that is capable of either digesting a resume, looking at a job description, looking at what recruiters and hiring managers want to be screened, and out pops the other end candidates. And it's like, for us as users, it's like, we don't want to know what happens in the middle. We're trying to take away that middle part. And you're saying, wait a minute, we need to look under there to see how it's operating. Can you give us some, maybe, are there some telltale signs that maybe the system is not working? There's so many ways for us to go with this. I don't even know where to
Yeah.
start on this.
Well, this goes back to that third-party risk process. Just ask questions. Look for explainability in the process. And so you talked about where there can be some inherent bias. If the model is trained off of biased data, it can bring that bias forward and amplify it. So it's important that you ask questions like, what did you train the model on? What data did you use? I think looking for bias audits and any kind of test of that information to show that there's no disparate impact across protected classes is a really important kind of safeguard here in this space as well. So there's definitely some things you can do to safeguard yourself or to be a little bit more proactive in this space. You're starting to leverage this, but yeah, it all comes down to data, right? I mean, all these systems are leveraging data, whether it's LLMs, whether it's your own kind of proprietary data sets. So it's spitting back out whatever reflection of that data it finds. And you got to think sometimes we're getting a reflection of our existing hiring processes that we're training off of. And I hate to say, not always the best starting point to find a bias-free environment where we haven't always had the right controls and even our human processes. But this is where we can start to embed some of those controls, more of that objectivity into our processes, and really use that human in the loop or that human oversight to add that kind of human characteristic, that review, the kind of user level oversight that says, hey, did it do the right thing? Is it leveraging the right kind of information? Does it feel like that decision or that recommendation is accurate? And even providing feedback when we don't see that it's providing the right result. I think that's a really critical piece right now as we're starting to get more involved with these systems, is that user level safeguard, that interaction that happens at the kind of point of selection or within the actual process itself by our hiring managers, our engagement managers.
I'm just kind of going at this from the standpoint of companies that are using AI to help them with their recruiting. There's a reason they're using it. It's because they're very busy. Already they're very busy. It's a very time consuming process. It can be a very manual process, and they're looking to improve this. Now you talk about adding another layer in potentially to validate or to audit. I could see some pushback just being that they don't even have time or the understanding of how to do this. So this is where your company, I believe, would come in. And
Yeah,
this is what I
yeah,
really want to this is really what I want to understand is, how does AI validation integrate into a company's processes to make it almost seamless? This is what I'd like to understand, because that would be
yeah,
fantastic if there was like
yeah.
you look over your process like a dashboard, and it's like green light, green light, green light, yellow, red. Okay, that's the spot I need to look at. Is this kind of where we're going with this, or maybe I'm adding
Absolutely.
functionality that you don't
Well,
have yet?
so kind of a scary environment, right? And I'll be the first to say that we leverage AI and automation wherever we can to be more effective at even that screening process, to make it so that it is more seamless, so that it's not an added step behind this. I think this is where even within the systems themselves. You get a lot of opportunity to create explainability logs or to create some of that audit trail. It's a matter of just setting up the monitors to be able to go in, connect to that data, and to be able to read it in real time. I actually get excited for the idea that technology helps us to move forward in some of this risk mitigation, because we've got a system and it's operating in a very objective way. It's leveraging data, hopefully in a very consistent way. If we can show some explainability to how those decisions are made, it really is a matter of logging that and getting a ton of information back about what it's doing right, wrong, and different. right? And so this happens, I think, in a future environment in real time in the background without a lot of intervention. And that's a lot of the models that we're creating right now is not just the models that are monitoring the data, but that are monitoring all of the compliance components as well. There's some incredible technology that's coming out in this space that I encourage people to look at because I think that's almost the easy button once you set it up to say, okay, let's just keep an eye on it. Let's make sure that we're not forgetting about it and that there's something paying attention to some of those risk factors.
Any business owner that's listening to this, you'll nod your head when you hear this. You know that we're in a very litigious society. And when you're looking at opening businesses or expanding a branch into certain states, some areas you just don't want to go into because you just know the laws are much more strict or stringent, and it becomes very prohibitive from an insurance standpoint to protect yourself from litigations and such. And there are people out there that target big companies. And I would imagine that companies who are doing the most hiring, being the most innovative, would also be a potential target for someone who would want to find this type of bias. So, one of the services I was doing some research on AI validation, and you say that you give a legal compliance record. So I liken this to a publicly traded company who has to submit their financials to a third party accounting firm, right, to be audited. And so if something comes out, someone comes after you, you here go talk to Ernst and Young. You're right; they've done everything for us. Can you kind of juxtapose what I just described to the type of service or peace of mind that you're providing?
Yeah, I always try to think about it like, what's the worst case scenario, and how do I feel comfortable that if that scenario happens, I've got everything that I need to defend my processes and my systems. And that's the starting point for creating that audit record is going through and being proactive at that investigation and not letting a court system that's going to go through that process find whatever kind of inequality is happening inside of your system. The one thing here is whether you intend to discriminate or not, it doesn't matter. If your system is doing something inappropriate, you're responsible for that. And we're starting to see legal precedent around that. There's some interesting cases actually in the market right now that we'll probably see some results on. I would imagine by the end of the year, that'll really start to set precedent around the responsibility level of the technologies and the customers equally in that process. So yeah, I think this is all really important as you start to think about how do I prepare to go to a court case. If somebody raised their hand and says, "I think I've been discriminated," do you have enough explainability in your process? If you have this black box system and you're not really sure what data it's using and how it's making decisions, I hate to say there are systems out there that have these really dynamic learning models that are really they're essentially leveraging deep learning and machine learning principles to constantly be taking information in and finding those connections and making decisions off of them. And that gets to be a really scary space where you don't always know why the decision was made or if it was made for the right reason. And so it's trying to work backwards from that and starting to think, okay, how do I create more of a transparent box or a white box type application where I know everything it's doing. I've got record of it and I can produce that record if I ever needed to, whether that was a court case, whether it was just an audit process, but trying to safeguard yourself so that whatever happens, you already know the answer to that conversation. And yeah, our service is essentially trying to bring that forward so that we can say, hey, we've already done that due diligence. Here's your audit file, and we can show up as a credible witness and essentially say we've done all the due diligence above and beyond even the standard of what a court might investigate.
Right. Right. And having that due diligence shows that you were paying attention, that you were looking inside the black box. And I think when you put it that way, the black box, I think it's scary a little bit because EEOC violations are they could end your company. They absolutely could end your company, particularly when you think about the time, money, and effort companies put into a good hiring brand, a culture, and then you add this kind of unknown black box that you think is going through everything in a very fair way. Come to find out, maybe you are discriminating, and the end result is you're not getting the good people. I mean, that's ultimately what you want. So
Yeah,
this
there's
process,
reputational risk. Absolutely, I think that's a big piece
reputational
of it.
risk. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious, just obviously you're working with many companies that are using some kind of an AI platform. A little bit of a side question. Have you heard feedback specifically from organizations who have been using some kind of AI in their processes that talk about either an improvement in candidate experience or a decrease, a lower NPS?
Yeah, I think the potential is there if it's architected the right way. I mean, this is a challenge I think we've seen in the workforce space for a long time, especially on the candidate side, right? Just even getting a response about a job application is a positive, right? And so I think anytime we can start to automate and improve that experience, we're going to be better off. A lot of the AI I think that companies are focused on today is more internal. I think we're starting to move towards more of that candidate-facing AI as the internal processes start to get reshaped, right? So things like chatbots, I think, are a really easy way for technology systems and enterprises to bring forward an interface that can do a lot of the low hanging fruit of that conversation and that engagement. And I think that's already going to give a lot of candidates more than what they may have had without some of that technology. I think the key behind all of this is signaling trust, though. It's do people feel comfortable in that interaction? I've gotten to the place now where I'd almost prefer to start an interaction with a chatbot or with the decisioning kind of UI where I can get to the right answers and then talk to a person if I need to. And I think that's an evolving mentality. I think people are starting to get more and more comfortable that they don't necessarily need a human forward type process to manage a lot of the things they're trying to accomplish within the process. So yeah, as we start to see more of that at comfort, I think we'll obviously see more value out of it. But it all comes with the trust on the candidate side. I think right now the trust is coming from transparency. And that's not necessarily a legal requirement, especially specifically here in the U.S., but it's another one of those important ethical concerns, right? I mean, we just talked a lot about explainability and can you say that your system's doing the right things, but are you showing that to a candidate and telling them why they were dispositioned, why they weren't a fit for a role, and again, not just have that explainability but feel comfortable showing it to the people that are impacted. That's essentially the premise of the Mobley case right now. That's the Workday Mobley case, where an individual, I think they were applying for jobs and got an auto um, disqualified, and started to wonder, why did the system make that decision on its own, and was it based off of protected classes or information that it shouldn't have made decisions on? And so you open up this whole idea of who's responsible. Is it the technology? Is it the customer? Was it used the right way? Was there actual discrimination? And so you have to go through that whole explainability process where you can start to think about transparency and how important it would be if they just brought that forward and said, hey, here's why that decision was just made, and be able to defend it. I think that's the important piece there.
Right. And if you're just instantly being rejected from a chat bot before you've had a chance to really engage, I think that would raise the red flag right away,
Yeah.
because typically you're going to go through some kind of screening and vetting and answering questions. And then, frankly, you should see from the questions that are being asked of you where they're going for this particular role. So I think intuitively people know, hey, they're asking these questions. I know very little about them. So clearly this is may not be a good fit for me. So I'm already kind of preconditioning myself to I'm going to get a rejection on this. And I think you're going to be fine with that. It's when you feel like you are uniquely qualified and you don't get it, that's when the red flag goes up. That's where you kind of want to like put your foot down out of frustration, because it's very hard to find a job. And then you remove the human element and it's like, why did this happen? You brought something up though about you don't mind going to get the information. And I think as the boomer class kind of moves completely out of the workforce, if they're not are they're just a few years and then they're going to be, I think, completely out of the workforce. And then you got the new generations coming in who are digital natives. I think we're going to see a much easier transition for them. I think it's the holdover Gen X and Boomer that are potentially those that are still used to picking up the phone and they want to talk to someone. I think as we get into the younger generations, I think it's going to be very, very common for them. In fact, they'll probably have their own AI agent. They'll probably have their own programmed agents to handle the responses from the other agents.
It's interesting kind of following some of the demographic shifts, and I absolutely agree. I think as some of the younger generations come in that are used to being in front of this technology, that are used to just figuring things out. I mean, I think about my daughter. She was about, I don't know, 2 or 3 when she learned the word Netflix, and had her own kind of iPad that she could navigate, and that was amazing to me to think about a kid that was starting to consume technology in that way. So it's inherent for them, right? And I think that there is kind of that transitional period where some of the older workforce is accustomed to doing things a traditional way, and that change process is always challenging for anybody, right? I mean, trying to think about doing something different that you've done, maybe your whole career, even your whole life one way. I mean, that's a substantial change, especially late career or after you've invested so much in that experience of that traditional process. And so that can be hard to start to adapt to, but I think that there is this slow comfort that we start to gain through that process. Like I start to think about like getting in a cab or a taxi, right? And think about what that evolution has been like, right? It used to be that you had to call a cab and they'd come and pick you up, and it's obviously a person. And then you start to get some automation through things like Uber and Lyft, where now you can automate that and you can connect to drivers and when they're scheduled. And now we start to see where you've got Waymo and some of these other automated taxi services that are just
Wild.
showing up without people in them. And it's like, I would have always said, like, I want a person driving my car, right? I always want to have that comfort. But now you start to look at, the safety of some of these automated systems and all the controls that are in place. And again, you start to wonder, okay, is this actually a more controlled and safer environment than people in that process who create wild variables in how they operate that process or can drive that car, right? So you start to slowly get comfortable not seeing that person driving the car. And I think that's going to happen in a lot of roles and a lot of functions, is where we just start to slowly kind of lose that need for the human component within it. Obviously, people bring amazing capabilities around relationships and reasoning, and there are a large portion of jobs that I don't think will ever feel comfortable kind of giving away to technology. But I do start to think that you start to see more and more kind of shift away from that need to feel like you have to have a human in a process. I think the human oversight is huge, but I think there's going to be more comfort in just kind of the day-to-day functioning of processes being controlled by AI systems or by the technology itself.
I think I speak for people who are in corporate who are using some type of an AI assistant. It's like having your own intern to do work for you, and I think as everyone becomes more familiar with how to use some type of an agent or whatever iteration your company is allowing you to use, you just begin to see it as a tool. And there may not ever be any layoffs in your company. It just may simply mean that instead of laying off, they may not have to hire. There could be we're doing more with less. Now, when you and I spoke really offline, Chris, I discovered you kind of fall into that category of the serial entrepreneur. You've come out of the industry, you've got 20 years, you've got a lot of kind of tech in your background as well. You're working on some other businesses here as well. Is there a tie-in with AI validation labs and this other one that we've got here?
Yeah, so I have a handful of just small startups, and I think they're all leaning into the idea that there is just this massive transformation that is in front of us, coming largely through just technology. Yeah, obviously AI Validation Lab is focused on the governance side of that, which I think is really important as people start to move forward. They think about that foundational layer of doing things the right way, safely and responsibly. But I do get excited about what that AI function starts to look like once we've built that layer. So I have a small startup that I support that is focused on building that agentic platform that helps to support the hiring process and becomes kind of the glue between all these hiring systems to help with orchestration and navigation of all of these disparate workforce processes and the data that comes with them. And I think that becomes again kind of a new space for technology where we start to think about companies that, we talked about the partners that are bringing that technology, but how are companies going to start to build this themselves and position these tools inside of their own environments, separate from these larger software vendors that are providing some of this technology as well. So yeah, I get excited about some of that, but I think a lot of the work that I really enjoy doing is, that innovation collaboration kind of conversation, and that's what's coming out of proof of concept right now. It started as kind of an assembly of just thought leaders and people that you kind of see at all the conferences. You always kind of catch up with once a year. You have good conversations. You tend to commiserate with, and nothing ever really happens out of the conversation. And so it's the idea of what if we go deeper? Like, what if we take those ideas and those challenges and those common issues and actually provide a platform where these peers across multiple companies can come together with similar challenges and crowdsource solutions in a really structured process. And so we're driving innovation and transformation and creating the expertise that some of these business leaders need to be able to transform and to move to that next step inside of their organization.
Now, so how would that work though? If you've got people from different companies and you've kind of come together under proof of concept to crowdfund and then innovatively create something new, how does that technology get dispersed among multiple people, multiple companies? Everyone's well, people are concerned about, having IP and things like that. So how do you kind of navigate the shared innovation?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when we first created the model, that was one of the things that all of our collaborators really focused on, was having the right set of terms and conditions around IP, which is essentially created under a Creative Commons, so that all the people that collaborate within that work actually own the research and all of the outcomes that are created from the projects. Kind of a cool different approach that, like I said, gives people some author credit and some kind of some noteworthy research in their portfolio as well. So I think that's the first part about it that's a little bit different. But what we're trying to do is create an experience for these people to really come together. Give them not just the structure, but the design of the conversation where it becomes constructive. So as much as it's important for us to share experiences, and I had this thing happen and you had this thing happen and all of that's important, but so what? Like, what do we take from that and apply it into the conversation to figure out what we do next, or how we learn and get better from that experience? So we have what we call collaboration architects that sit in all these conversations that are really thoughtful about how they design the discussions. They keep the discussions in the middle, on track. And the idea is that at the end of a project sprint, we take all the discussions, all the content, all that collateral, and we organize it into that output. Our last sprint was actually focused on AI. We spent 2 weeks with about a dozen different collaborators, and it was amazing. In 2 weeks, we created almost 74 pages of research content that talked about really the maturity life cycle of AI adoption. It talked about the use cases that were most important for program owners and for workforce leaders. And it took us through that thought process that they had end to end, and created a buyer persona or buyer perspective around AI, which was really incredible. And so, yeah, this is the idea of trying to take this beyond kind of a think tank and become really more of a doing tank.
A doing tank. With your background in staffing, obviously it would make sense to have other leaders from staffing, but this sounds like a model that might serve other industries.
Yeah,
Are you looking
potentially.
at other industries, or are you just starting inside of staffing?
Starting where we have the most kind of expertise and network, which is workforce management, HR, talent acquisition, and procurement. But yeah, absolutely. I think the model is getting a lot of just a lot of adoption. We hear a lot of good feedback from the people that are going through the process, and so yeah, I think there is potential there for other industries to kind of learn from that model. But yeah, our expertise is really in
It's
this
workforce.
talent space.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so
yeah.
it helps
Okay.
us to really make sure that the conversations stay aligned.
Yeah.
And I have some incredible partners and some incredible kind of collaborators that all kind of come from the space. The other thing is most of the people that are supporting these sprints are full-time actually practitioners in the space as well. So this becomes kind of like a little bit of a side gig, kind of a pet project for a lot of them. next to their full-time jobs. And so, yeah, a really interesting kind of emerging model that I would imagine we'll start to see more and more of that. I think that's one of the side effects that's coming from AI. Is I saw an article recently that there's kind of this resurgence of in-person activity that's coming because it's kind of creating a big gap where people are normally spending more of their day interacting with AI and less personal kind of components, where now we're recreating more personal kind of interactions, things like in-person events or Zoom webinars, things like this. And so I think it'll have a place from a networking perspective where people are going to really want to hear from each other. There's a level of trust that happens in that collaboration where you're hearing from somebody else that's going through it, that's having similar experiences. And it's very relatable, I think, for a lot of the participants.
I've been to conferences where the best takeaway was not a single speaker, not a singer, not a single organized event, but yet the networking that took place before the event, at lunch, the nighttime mixers, just getting to work with and be around your peers that have come from all over the country and building those bonds, creating those relationships, and it just strengthens your desire and your passion within the industry or the company you work for. And I think what you've just said there is spot on. I think we've become so remote that building that connectivity now is almost, in my opinion, can be more important than anything else that might the program leaders have even designed. It's just that getting together, and iron sharpening iron, if you will.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the conference space, and I'll say that there almost becomes a little bit of a divide with the attendees that go to these conferences. The people that show up for that first and second year, they're excited about the content and they're learning new things, and there's a ton to absorb. The people that are showing up in that third and fourth plus year are there for the community. They're there for each other. It's almost turns into more of like this high school reunion kind of environment
Right.
where you're just excited to hey, I know it's the one time I'm going to see Tony, and Tony's going to tell me all the cool things he's doing with staffing, and I'm going to learn from all of my peers. And that experience is becoming more important to, we'll say, some of the alumni that are going to these conferences than the actual content that's being put on stage. And so trying to give a platform for that, and trying to lean into those folks that want more than just a quick 40-minute, I heard somebody's talking about this in a panel session kind of review of a topic, people that want to get hands-on and actually create their own expertise around a subject.
Well, I think you and I are going to have a series of podcasts. We're going to probably have to bring in more people to continue our conversation as we go into all these different really avenues that are very important. We're really just scratching the surface today. And this is really my promise to the audience, in this learning and development format. You first have to learn, you first have to even discover that there's something that you need to do a deep dive. We didn't do quite the deep dive. It's difficult to do that on such a important topic with so many different avenues that we could go down. Chris, what's the best way for people to begin connecting with you and learning more about what you're doing and kind of relying on your expertise?
Yeah, so check out our website, aivalidationlab.com. That's the best place to go to consume all of our content and understand more about responsibility and safety with AI products. We also just launched an incredible training program with some on-demand modules that really focus on AI in this hiring space. If you're interested in our collaboration group, Proof of Concept, you can follow us at solveconcepts.com, or we also have a community inside of a group called Direct Collective. It's amazing assembly of all the industry leaders in one place for us to all work together. So yeah, people can follow us on LinkedIn as well, but reach out. I always love to catch up and talk more about this. You can see it's kind of a passion of mine.
It absolutely is a passion of yours. And I'm very grateful that you took some time out of running 97,000 companies to talk to us a little bit about what to be looking for in AI, ethics, and validation. I think that's what I'm looking for there. Chris, great seeing you again, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony. I enjoyed it.
You
Thanks.
got it. We'll do this again. We'll bring in some more folks and we'll expand. We'll
Yeah,
see you
so many
next
things we
time.
could be talking about. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see everyone again soon.